Hello YouTube, Vlogging Eric's Rants here, and this week I'm going to be doing a video response to an article made by Andrew Bolt called War on Christianity is Fueled by Ignorance, which is ironic considering that a lot of Christians in Australia and other countries with large Christian populations are the ignorant ones, including you, Andrew Bolt. So just so you know, Andrew Bolt is an Australian journalist, newspaper columnist, radio commentator, blogger, columnist, and a former associate editor of the Melbourne-based Herald Sun. He's also a Christian, although he denies it, as you will see at the end of this article. So with this introduction out of the way, let's begin with the article and my rebuttal of it. So his first line is, Christians are being harassed out of the public space. Just before he starts his article, I don't think so. There are still a lot of people in the public space who are Christian in Australia, just nowhere near as many as the US, for example. So the first two lines of his article says, it's not the haters who will kill Christianity, it's the ignorant who have no clue how we non-Christians will suffer. But wow, that hatred sure is feral. The latest examples? And I'll get to the examples in a moment. Firstly, you are a Christian, Bolt, even if you deny it. You have faith in Christianity and you have supported and defended the Bible and used the Bible to oppose same-sex marriage. Secondly, again, projecting your ignorance on everybody else. Twice already, Bolt, that's something. But let's go on with these examples. These 5 examples Bolt gives I will rebut as a group. 1. The Greens this week say they want to strip churches of their, quote, right to discriminate. Actually, their freedom to insist their employees live the faith. 2. Sydney University Student Union threatened to deregister the university's evangelical union unless it stopped insisting members declare their faith in Jesus Christ. 3. Christian lobby group Family Voice Australia this week accused Facebook of deleting one of its pages arguing against same-sex marriage. 4. Facebook administrators had earlier deleted a page by the Centre for Public Christianity calling on same-sex marriage activists to be less abusive. It was restored after protests by Tim Wilson, the former Freedom Commissioner and now Liberal candidate in Goldstein. 5. Yet another church in Melbourne was burned to the ground last month and 4 in Geelong have been torched in 6 months. Arson attacks have got a fraction of the media attention given to the burning of a Geelong mosque. Police say the mosque may have been mistaken for the church that this bluestone building originally was. So firstly, the Greens are progressives and they want marriage equality and are against homophobia. Also, homophobia is very damaging to gay couples. And I did a video called The Plebiscite on same-sex marriage is moronic, which I will link up in the description for the plebiscite placating the homophobes in the Liberal Party. The Facebook two are related to the biases of people within Facebook. Homophobia is wrong, although I will hold 3 and 4 until I find the source for these. As for number 5, I know of one church in Melbourne that was reported to have been burned down, but otherwise, source please. Also, 5 examples of single events are not indicative that Christians, who make up about 60% of the Australian population, are being persecuted. Yes, there are evil people, and those burning down a few of the thousands, if not tens of thousands of churches that exist in Australia. Those people are evil. Quote, these attacks are part of a disturbing pattern. Everywhere Christians are being harassed out of the public space. In Victoria, for instance, state schools have new rules against the singing of not just hymns, but, it seems, a more religious Christmas carol. As for your first part of this line, source please. Again, 61% of Australians are Christians, so Christians are the majority in this country. As for state schools ruling against Christian carols and hymns, usually because they're secular schools and the country is secular. A separation of church and state is a critical part of this country. Most state schools don't want to indoctrinate children into religious beliefs, which goes against separation of church and state. You're not disturbed, you're just butthurt that Christians aren't revered like they were in the old days. So the next 2 lines, quote, in Tasmania, a former transgender Greens candidate complained to the state's Anti-Discrimination Commission about a Catholic Church pamphlet opposing same-sex marriage. She has since dropped the action. No shit, Sherlock. Of course that the former transgender Greens candidate would complain about the pamphlet. An example of why? It's a very common tactic done by Christians. You know, linking homosexuality to pedophilia. Messing with marriage is messing with kids. And messing with kids is general code for pedophilic acts. I've got 2 videos on Christian homophobes linking homosexuality to pedophilia, linking both in the description as well. This is something that I would complain about, just to get that line reworded. This is not Christian persecution. This is a Catholic school trying to justify homophobia by linking something natural, homosexuality, to a mental illness, pedophilia. You actually said that the Anti-Discrimination Commission ordered the local archbishops to explain why they should continue being offensive. In the next line, no matter. This quote, please explain is towards all Australian archbishops. And thanks to your article, I'm not sure whether it is just on homosexuality or if it's on something else. Next line is, quote, SBS has already decided Christians shouldn't. It banned an ad made by Christians defending traditional marriage, yet ran one by Ashley Madison for a dating service for adulterers. So, I know that adulterers are evil according to you, and of course that comes from the Bible, and the defending of traditional marriage is rich coming from Christians, considering that traditional marriage can apply to both heterosexual marriage and polygamy, as polygamy has appeared a lot of times in the Bible. Adultery isn't wrong, but homophobia is. Next up is the allegation of the media being hostile to Christians. Quote, the media is particularly hostile to Christians, using the sex scandals of churches last century as an excuse to smash the churches today. I don't know if you think that Catholics are true Christians or not. It does seem that you do think that Catholics are Christians, but it does seem that the media are attacking Catholics specifically, and it's because of the Royal Commission into Pedophile Priests where all of these horrible stories are coming out. I made a video on this as well, link in the description. So let's continue with this article. Quote, radio and television outlets recently played at high rotation a song by comedian Tim Minchin vilifying Catholic Cardinal George Pell as a, quote, coward and, quote, scum, and falsely suggesting he's covered up for pedophile priests. Tim Minchin is both a comedian and it is known that he hates George Pell. As to the, quote, false suggestion he covered up for pedophile priests, I honestly don't know if he has covered for pedophile priests, but to say that the allegations made were false is extremely disingenuous. Quote, last year, actor Rachel Griffiths told ABC Radio she was, quote, quite elated, end quote, that arsonists had burned down the beautiful St. James Church in Brighton because it had decades ago had a priest who'd abused his children. Okay, she's an arsehole when it comes to that. Even I'll admit that is a bit too far. Burning down churches is not okay. The only reason you added this is to add to your persecution narrative. A narrative that is false. Now he goes on to Easter. Quote, just check how The Age this year marked Easter, Christianity's holiest festival. There are two major problems here. Firstly, even the biblical scholars have admitted that Easter was originally a pagan festival celebrating the equinox. It was adapted to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, somebody who has little evidence of his existence. That second part's also the second stupid thing here. Quote, on Maundy Thursday, it complained that St. James was being rebuilt for $20 million and called for churches to be stripped of their tax exemption. And on the tax exemption, I agree with The Age. My taxpayers' money should not be going towards subsidising religious institutions in breach of the separation of church and state. The church being rebuilt, the cost is maybe a bit excessive, but if they want to build it, if they pay their own way, more power to them. But not using taxpayers' money, that's wrong. Quote, on Good Friday, it praised a retired teacher who'd once confronted a pedophile priest and later claimed, exaggeratedly, the Catholic Church was keeping files, quote, secret from victims. More power to the teacher, I say. And I would be very surprised if the church wasn't keeping files secret from victims. It is not exaggerated, it is almost certainly true. Quote, true, attacks on the church are nothing new. What is new, though, is the ignorance of so many about what's at stake and their indifference to the fight. Projecting again, Andrew Bolt, are we? Naturally, your butthurt and ignorance is really showing. And there is no fight except against ignorance, butthurt and stupidity. The former two particularly applying to you. The latter one sort of applying to you. Quote, how many young Australians, even young journalists, understand just what Christianity teaches and inspires? Probably a lot more people in this generation than in previous generations. And among the things that Christianity teaches, that the Bible is okay with, includes racism, misogyny, rape, slavery, pedophilia, and many other things that we would find absolutely revolting today. Quote, last month, The Australian reported on an Islamic State sympathiser in Kempsey prison who allegedly attacked a former Australian soldier, carving E for E into his head. And relevance? Another example cherry-picked to fit your narrative, Bolt. There is no war on Christianity in Australia. They are the majority. And for your claim about the Islamic State sympathiser, I have just one thing to say to you. Source, please. And now, to drop something massive onto Andrew Bolt, But let's let him get to his Testament dichotomy. Quote, the reporter explained, the phrase is thought to refer to an eye for an eye, which appears in both Christian and Islamic texts. But the Christian New Testament actually records Jesus denouncing such justice. And right here, I think you have no idea about the verses. Matthew 5:17 through 20. Quote, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen, will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5:17 through 20, New International Version. So sorry, Bolt, the Old Testament is still valid, and refer to Exodus 21:22 through 25 for the eye for an eye quote. If people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. An owner who hits a male or female slave in the eye and destroys it must let the slave go free to compensate for the eye. Exodus 21:22 through 25, New International Version. So that debunks the next multiple lines in your article. Let's go on with this. Basically, this is the whole section that I debunk. But the Christian New Testament actually records Jesus denouncing such justice. You have heard that is what's said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. The Quran, though, says, a life for a life, an eye for an eye, a nose for a nose, an ear for an ear, a tooth for a tooth. And for wounds is legal retribution. This difference explains why no Christian country has an eye for an eye justice system, but a Muslim theocracy such as Iran does. This is much more like Christians being more secular in the West than the Muslims have in the East. However, the eye for an eye thing was in the Old Testament, and according to Matthew 5:17 through 20, the Old Testament is still valid. Quote, but making Islam seem no worse than Christianity is now fashionable, not least because it excuses surrender to a creed that threatens the freedoms Christianity defends. No! Christianity, in fact religious fundamentalism in general, holds down everybody. The doctrine of most religions persecute, at the very least, gays, non-believers, blasphemers, women, represses sexuality, freedom and liberty. Secularism is the way to go, and that gives freedom and liberty and equality for all. So Christianity doesn't defend these freedoms because the freedoms are not based on Judeo-Christian beliefs. It is secular in nature. So he goes on to talk about what he calls a bizarre example where, quote, caller, I've got a Sunni Muslim friend. He loves his AFL, a real typical kind of Aussie bloke. But he's adamant that stoning is the best punishment for adulterers. Faint. Why is that any different to people in the Orthodox Jewish community, for instance, who have some bizarre beliefs, or people in the Hillsong, or any other happy-clappy Christian community who have all sorts of bizarre beliefs? They just live their lives. It's not as if they put them into practice. Caller. That may be true, John, but I'm specifically wondering what you would do in that situation. Faint. Oh, I'd say, well, that's pretty wacky, and who's going to win on Sunday? So number one, relevance? I don't see it. Secondly, he can believe what he believes. It's stupid, it's wacky, but he's entitled to it. And thirdly, I can name Christians who call for death for homosexuals. Theodore Schubert, Pat Robertson, the Vigilant Christian, and Brian Fisher. Just 4. Fundamentalist Christians. All 4 call for the death penalty for homosexuality. Here, they've said it multiple times. Go to Right Wing Watch blog and see their ramblings, and the Vigilant Christian YouTube channel for Mario. Next up, Andrew Bolts continues by saying that gay rights activists are no better than Islamists. Quote, our gay activists are no better. Like the Greens, they rage at the church's stance on same-sex marriage, but are completely silent about the most violent expression of gay hatred, the hanging of gays in Iran and the throwing of gays off tall buildings by the Islamic State in Syria. Well, some of the churches do now support same-sex marriage, although some of the churches don't support marriage equality still. And yes, there are left-wing same-sex marriage supporters who don't go after gay killing in the Middle East, mainly because of the social justice warriors that form the bulk of the regressive left. However, the progressive left, myself included, abhor what Iran and Daesh are doing and condemn it, along with the religious extremists in Christianity who also want to kill homosexuals. Again, Note just the 4 fundamentalist Christians who advocate death for homosexuals that I listed. Those are just few of the millions of Christians who also believe the same thing. In addition to all the African nations that are Christian theocracies, and they kill homosexuals all the time. Quote, "These new Christ haters are hypocrites and dangerously ignorant of an important truth. The gods actually differ and inspire different behaviour." Well, are the gods being different, then yes, that is true, with the exception of Judaism, Christianity and Islam, all worshipping different interpretations of the same God. However, the fundamentalists of these religions inspire very similar behaviour. Quote, "Christianity, for instance, tells us to treat even strangers as we would our own kin and insists the life of even the most lowly is sacred." And here is where just one of the hundreds or even thousands of contradictions in the Bible is shown. The Old Testament is extremely bloodthirsty and the New Testament is very pacifistic. But remember from the Matthew verse I quoted, the Old Testament is still valid. Quote, "Christ is recorded in the New Testament as preventing the stoning of an adulterous woman, famously saying, quote, 'Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.'" And yes, according to the New Testament, Jesus did say that. However, the New Testament was written a long time after Jesus apparently lived, even far longer afterwards than the Old Testament was written. But most of the prophets of Christianity, unfortunately for you, were warmongers. Quote, "The Muslim prophet Muhammad, however, is recorded in the famous biography by Ibn Ishaz, sorry if I butchered your name, of having ordered the murder of, quote, 2 singing girls, Fantana and her friend, who used to sing satirical songs about the apostle." Yeah, he ordered the deaths of 2 people. Muhammad spent the entire Numbers section, Numbers 31 specifically, spreading the spoils of war, including the grand committing of rape and pedophilia. Most of the prophets of Christianity were warmongers, Bolt. And also, do you know why Muhammad was a warmonger? Because of the Jews, the ISIS of the time, and Christians, the Al-Qaeda of the time. The Quran was all happy and good in the first part of the book, but once Muhammad had a major argument with Judaism and Christianity, then the Quran turned violent. Once your religion attacked him, did Muhammad finally decide to fight fire with fire? Quote, "The founder of the faiths led very different lives. One a preacher of non-violence, the other a warrior king. Their respective religions express their culture, and culture counts in influencing behaviours." Again, Bolt, Muhammad only became a warrior king when he was attacked by the Christians and Jews of the day. Basically, they were the Al-Qaeda and ISIS of 1400 years ago. Your religion back in Muhammad's day, as well as Judaism, created the warrior king. Quote, "Consider which society is the safest for non-believers, which are most likely to be democracies, which are least likely to treat terrorists as heroes, which are the least likely to allow humans to be destroyed for an allegedly higher cause. Each time the answer is Christian." Flat out lie, Bolt. Which society is the safest for non-believers? Which are the most likely to be democracies? Which are the least likely to treat terrorists as heroes? Which are the least likely to allow humans to be destroyed for an allegedly higher cause? Guess what it actually is? Secularism! Separation of church and state. On the last of the questions you ask, the chances of allowing humans to be destroyed for an allegedly higher cause in secularism is 0. Nada. Zilch. Nothing. So no, Bolt, Christian societies are not the safest, democratic, least likely to treat terrorists as heroes, and least likely to destroy humans for an allegedly higher cause. Just go to the theocratic countries in Central Africa and see how every single one of your claims in this line is debunked. Quote, "Christianity proudly inspires the values of these societies, even if many of their citizens despise it." Yeah, such great Christian values such as death to gays, Leviticus 20:13, witches, Exodus 22:18, Sabbath breakers, Exodus 31:14, condoning of slavery, Leviticus 25:44-46, racism, quote, "chosen people," rape and pedophilia, Numbers 31:1-54, and misogyny, Genesis 3:16. Yeah, such great values. Fuck off. All of those are abhorrent, and most of the good things quoted by fundamentalist Christians were borrowed from other places. And finally, the irony police arrest this man moment. Quote, "I am no Christian, but I have faith in Christianity. Will we be this safe once it's gone?" First part, you're a Christian, Bolt, don't deny it. And secondly, we would actually be more safe if there was no religion running things. Secularist states are the safest. And before you cite communism with Stalin, the Kim line, Pol Pot and Mao Zedong, communism is basically a religion unto itself. Why do you think the Soviet Russia under Stalin was called Stalinist Russia? Or how about Maoist China? It's because the leaders of those parts of the world at the time were set up as gods to the people. So they were theocratic states in some sense of the word. So that is the end of the article, and I think you can see now the level of butthurt and persecution complex Andrew Bolt is showing off in this article. Go to the United States of America, Bolt. You will be loved by the theocrats over there. I don't want you here, and there are probably quite a few people in Australia that don't want you here either. So that is my video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry it's so long, but I had to rebut everything Bolt said in this article. Please rate, comment, share and subscribe, and have a great day everyone.